This video covers the Array2D image class for an Array2D image file. We are using the Oxygen XML Editor. At the end of this video, you should be able to fill out the Array2D image class for an observational product label, know how parts of an array are referenced in other sections of the label, how the label encodes the format of an array's axes and elements for reading by software, and how various properties of the array are validated to ensure it is read correctly. Feel free to pause or go back in the video at any time to review the material. The Array2D image class provides a description of the bytes comprising a two-dimensional array representing an image. If a single data file contains multiple arrays, you will need an instance of this class for each one. Similar classes exist to describe other types of arrays, such as Array3D image or Array2D spectrum. These classes share many attributes but differ in their permissible values and associated discipline dictionaries. The first attribute, name, is optional. It provides a human-readable string to identify the array object. If there are multiple arrays in a file, this attribute can distinguish between them. The local identifier attribute is used as a reference in case other parts of the label need to cross-reference a particular array object. For all image arrays, you should have an associated display settings class that references the array. Choose a unique descriptive value for this attribute. Local identifier is technically an optional attribute, so omitting it will not raise a validation error. However, if your display settings class cannot find a matching local identifier value, you will get an error. If you know your array takes the form of a displayable image, be sure to include this attribute. An optional MD5 checksum attribute can be included here for data integrity purposes. Note that within the Array2D image class, this attribute specifies a checksum for the bytes of the array only, not the file. The offset attribute is required and marks the offset in bytes from the beginning of the file to the beginning of the array. The units of storage must also be specified. Currently, the only valid unit of storage is byte. To indicate the unit, write unit equals byte inside the opening tag after the name of the attribute. The axes attribute specifies the number of axes in your array. Since we are labeling a 2D image, this value must be set to 2. Access index order is a required attribute which tells a program reading the array which access of the index varies fastest. It is required to have a value of last index fastest. The order of the axes is indexed by the sequence number attribute, which we will come to later. If the purpose of your array object is not obvious, which may be the case when a file contains multiple arrays, you can include an optional description attribute to provide clarity. Next is the element array class, which describes the format of the individual values of your array. First is the data type attribute. This records the numeric type, i.e., the hardware storage type, of the individual elements of the array. If you are labeling a fits image, the value of bitpix translates to a specific data type. A schema-aware editor, such as the Oxygen Editor, can check if this attribute contains one of the allowed values but cannot check against the array itself. If you select the wrong data type, your array may be read without error but with incorrect data values, or the array may not be read improperly because a different number of bytes was expected. Be sure to check that PDS tools are reading the array properly. The next three attributes in element array are optional and should only be included if necessary. Unit corresponds to the unit of measure of array values, such as DNs or electrons. If no unit is specified, omit this attribute. Scaling factor is a multiplicative factor applied uniformly to all elements in the array. Any real number is permitted. A factor of 1 should be omitted. Value offset is an additive real number applied uniformly to all elements in the array. Omit offsets of 0. When computing the final value for an element, first scaling factor and then value offset are applied. After element array is axis array, a class describing one axis of your array. You'll need two of these for Array2D image. Axis array begins with axis name, a required attribute providing a name that can be referenced elsewhere in the label. For 2D images, axis name must be set to either line or sample. If one axis is line, then the other must be sample. The next attribute, elements, specifies the number of elements along this axis of the array. Finally, the sequence number attribute sets an order for axes in the array. The highest sequence number is the last index, which is read fastest. For 2D arrays, the first axis array must have a sequence number of 1 and the second a value of 2. The final two classes, special constants and object statistics, are optional. The special constants class provides a way to label flag values in your array. For example, if an element takes the value -99 when the true value is missing, include a missing constant attribute with the value -99. Depending on the data type of your array, matching the value of an element to a special constant may not be possible, for example when comparing floating point numbers to integers. Additionally, NaN values may not be used with special constants. Be sure to check that tools are properly identifying any special constants you use. The Object Statistics class can provide a thumbnail characterization of an image using statistical metrics. All its attributes are optional. If you use the PDS Validate tool with content validation enabled, some object statistics such as minimum and maximum are actually checked against the values in your array. The Array 2D Image class appears in the File Observational class after File. If you have multiple arrays, list them in the order in which they appear in the data object. Thank you for watching this video, which covered filling out the Array 2D Image class for an Array 2D Image file. In this video, we saw how parts of an array are referenced in other sections of the label, how the label encodes information that allows the file to be read by software, and how various properties of the array are validated to ensure it is read correctly.